Hey, how's it going? I'm David, and this is the developer diary for the React Visual Docs project. And with this project, I want to build a tool called React Visual Docs. And this developer diary is going to be a way of just logging my progress through the project, and it's going to give you guys an opportunity to see how I do a project myself. And hopefully, you'll be able to learn something from that. And for myself, I'm hoping that doing this developer diary will help keep me on track and think through ideas a bit more thoroughly before actually implementing them. So what are we going to talk about in this introduction episode? Well, currently I have the project still in the planning phase, so there's not much actual development work to talk about, but I can give you an introduction to what I'm planning on doing, the motivation behind the project, and kind of some of the stuff we're going to talk about as we go through the project. So let's talk about what React is for a bit, because React is kind of what this project centers around, and if you don't know what React is, then this is not going to make a whole lot of sense. So React is a web framework for building dynamic web applications on the client side using JavaScript. It is owned and maintained by Facebook, but it's also open source, which allows other developers, even for-profit companies, to use React to build their own applications. That is, unless you're building something like a social network that competes with Facebook, because Facebook doesn't want to give you something that's then going to cut into their profit margins. But anything outside of the social network realm is kind of fair game right now. So if you want to get to know a bit more about React, I'm actually just going to send you to another tutorial. I'm going to link it up here somewhere, as well as in the description down below, and then you can go learn about it a bit yourself. That might help you a bit in the later episodes when we go into the actual code of React, but I'm still going to keep it at an introductory level even when I'm talking about React. I'm going to try to explain things as much as possible, so you might not necessarily need it, but I think it would help. So in React Visual Docs, we talked about React already. Let's talk about the docs part of that. So documentation is actually like one of the hardest things to do in software development. It's hard to make documentation that is consistent with what the code is actually doing, because apps change a lot all the time. It's hard for developers to manually keep updating that documentation over and over again, especially when there's deadlines approaching, and the documentation just becomes less and less of a priority in projects. And I've actually encountered this many times in projects that I've worked on myself. I'll come into a project and there will be just no documentation or out-of-date documentation. And it's hard being a new developer on a project where there's poor documentation, because it's hard to kind of gain context of like what's actually happening in the application and in the code base. So the main issue right now with documentation in software development is that it is often out of date or not even there at all. So how can we in this project make a tool that instills trust in the documentation for developers? How can we trust that it's always going to be up to date and that it's going to be accurate and have proper context? So with React Visual Docs, what my main goal is I want to create a tool that will allow developers to be able to trust the documentation and not have to maintain the documentation so much manually. So what I'm planning on doing is actually just parsing out information out of the code itself, rather than having to add additional documentation. There's going to be some stuff that I'm going to parse that is actual documentation that's inlined in the code, but everything's going to build towards creating this tool that's going to make developers not have to write as much documentation, and the little documentation that they will have to write will actually provide exponential value compared to what it provides right now. So hopefully that will be an extra incentive for developers to actually write the little bit of documentation that they have to write. So I'm going to be parsing the actual code base, the source code of projects, and then with that parsed data, I'm going to be able to generate documentation that developers can then go look at, and it's going to be always up to date because it's going to be something that the machine generates from the actual code that's running, rather than relying on developers to maintain the documentation as much. Now I've gotten a bit of the research phase and project management stuff done with this project so far. That's all on GitHub actually. You can go check out the link in the description and find out more information about that, or you can just wait until we talk about that stuff in following episodes. So what you can expect from the next episodes is that I'm going to be talking about the actual designs. I'm going to mock up a few screens of what the UI is going to look like. We're going to do a bit of like data parsing with JavaScript, dive into a library called React DocGen, which I'm going to be using and modifying a little bit. And hopefully we'll go a bit more into detail on the actual features of the application. Right now I have a project timeline and an overview, which you can see on the GitHub as well. That's in the description. So there's certainly a lot of things in this project that I'm not sure about. There's things that I haven't done before, haven't even thought about doing before, that I'm gonna need to learn how to do. So that's gonna be interesting to see how I'm able to overcome those obstacles and solve those problems. But I don't know. We'll see what happens in the future episodes. Anyway, that's it. Leave a comment, like, share, do all that fun stuff. I'm David. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.